Our thoughts and conversations turn towards home, to our loved ones, our Führer and our fatherland. We're not afraid to cry as we stand to remember our Führer and our fallen comrades. It's like an oath binding us together, making us grit our teeth and carry on until victory. What is life worth to us? It's true that our joy in living and lust for life are stronger now than they've ever been, but each of us is ready to sacrifice his life for the Holy Fatherland. This fatherland is my faith and my only hope. All the best feelings in my heart are directed towards it. At home, they'll be sitting under the Christmas tree as well. I can see my brave old dad, see him stand and drink with reddened eyes to the soldiers. And my courageous mother, she'll certainly be crying a bit, and my little sister too. But one day there'll be another new year when we can all be together, happily reunited after a victorious end to the mass slaughter of the nations. That superior spirit which moves the young people must lead us to victory. There is no alternative. To win through or to die in battle. Those are my thoughts at 1 a.m. on the first day of 1943. Now, 40 years later, as I sit and look at these notes I wrote then, I can only shake my head in wonder at the way our young people were so inspired, but so very much misled. And I want to shout, to cry out to the youngsters of today, never, never let yourselves be persuaded into fighting for anyone or anything. Yet still I must admit to doubts, to the feeling that under certain circumstances it might be necessary to risk one's life to protect freedom. But then, what is freedom? We toil and labour at our bunkers and defensive positions, for it seems certain that the Russians' big attack won't be delayed much longer, and they'll certainly attempt to blow us all to pieces beforehand. On the 7th of January, Gefreiter Tim is hit in the lower body, and Erkan has a dangerous stomach wound. Then Rochlitz accidentally shoots himself in the head whilst cleaning his pistol. The men are drilled over and over again, and instructed to take extra care when cleaning their weapons. But these things still happen. Fate. On the 1st of January, I order my men to cease fire. Maybe it'll make Ivan a little nervous about our intentions. We're still desperately short of men, enough to make us celebrate the arrival of every replacement. On the 12th of January, Gefreiter Dietrich arrives, fresh from Gardelegen. This damned work and the continuous watchfulness are really playing on our nerves. But only a couple of hours later, Obergefreiter Wilfert is brought in with a head wound. The irregular Russian zone fire continues to claim its victims, and we're powerless against it, despite taking every precaution. On the 14th of January, there's another large delivery of post, which cheers everyone up no end. Although the days remain quiet, at night the Russians have started sending over large numbers of reconnaissance planes. Something's definitely in the air. Horn arrives from the military hospital, and we're sent Gefreitsbals and Hansen from the train. A bit of breathing space at last. Then my old platoon headquarters leader, Unteroffizier de Witz, arrives back from officer candidate school. Oberleutnant Holters has been killed in action, and I go on my skis to his funeral. But then I get an unexpected pleasure when I meet up with my old gunner from Dietelgun, Max, and he's got the most enormous parcel for me. My sweet, innocent parents have given it him to bring for me. They obviously think that you can travel right up to the front line by train. Old Iron Gustav is still circling around. We see it almost every day on its reconnaissance flights. We've no anti-aircraft guns, so it goes its way unhindered. Obergefreit Gotz has been wounded, but we're managing to harass the Russians too, from our strongly built and well-camouflaged defensive positions, with fixed fire from our machine guns. We already know where they are and can adjust our fire accordingly. I managed to get someone from a range of 1,400 meters. One afternoon I narrowly escaped death. Quite unsuspectingly, I was standing near an explosive charge, unaware that it was about to be detonated. A sudden shout of, "Get down!" And I fell flat just as the whole lot went up. Fortunately for them, the shock made me completely forget to shoot the idiots on guard. Since the 1st of February, we've been in a state of increased alert. According to information from Russian deserters, the big offensive will begin on my right flank. There are also rumours that we're to be relieved. Many even purport to know the exact date. But such stories leave the veterans amongst us cold. We're immune to latrine rumours by now. Unteroffizier Itzikovsky is firing at a Russian sentry post using the telescopic sight, observed by Obergefreiter Fuchs and myself. Suddenly there's a hail of fire from the other side. When Fuchs grabs himself around the heart, I'm sure that he's done for, and start to drag him to the trenches. But he manages to hobble to the bunker under his own steam, I can hardly believe my eyes, and removes a 14mm anti-tank rifle bullet from his shoe. We're both stunned at his incredible luck. At 11 a.m, Obergefreiter Waldfricht is hit at the entrance to the bunker. Though I get to him straight away, there's nothing anyone can do to save him. At least his death means that he was spared a court-martial for his serious misconduct and dereliction of duty during his sentry duties. Unfortunately, incidents such as those are greatly on the increase at the moment. I catch Obergefreiter Kluwer with a woolen scarf wrapped round both ears during sentry duty, having got within 2 meters of him. I'd really like to give him a good military thrashing. This negligence, it's enough to make you puke. The 5th of February. Stalingrad is on everybody's lips. We try to imagine what the soldiers there must be enduring, and marvel at their heroic dedication to duty. Surely their conduct will strengthen our whole people. A nation which has such men can never be defeated. In the middle of February the thaw sets in, and how? Now we can clearly see the enemy's trenches and bunkers, and they can see ours just as plainly. Water is dripping and running everywhere. The mud is knee-deep in the trenches and has to be shoveled out. Clothes and weapons are all filthy. The 19th of February. It's 2 a.m. I can't get the Goebbels speech calling for total war out of my mind. The speech was so tremendous and fantastic that I feel I have to write home with my own response. Everyone was carried away by his words. All of us were under his spell. He spoke to us from the heart. Total war at last. Yes, of course, but why not earlier? He calls for the utmost effort from each and every one of us, for each one to do his duty in service to the fatherland. Only in this way, we all agree, can we win the war. For us, Stalingrad was a signal, calling us to make a sacred commitment. The 20th of February. One of my best men, Max Gribble, has been killed in a place where hardly any other shots were fired, by a bullet through the collarbone which pierced a blood vessel. His young, strong life has been snuffed out. A fine lad, through and through. He would have been the first to be granted leave, in recognition of his guts in the counter-attack on Cape Horn. We're going to miss him, our Max. Yesterday I came back from a tour round the front. I made an enormous cross-country ski trip via Kizeli Sabolotse Klimati to Oberleutnant Reuter's game park. They're living in feudal conditions there, in the best of senses, in a giant bungalow made of birchwood with an open chimney and chairs of birch. Miss Lovicki, Jürgen Scherer, the captain, and all the old Feldwebels were there, so we got drunk on memories and current happenings, as well as on vast quantities of alcohol. After long abstinence, I was so totally plastered that I took days to get over it. Those were 2 wonderful days, unforgettable. I met up with K. Umbach again, a man I remembered from the old days. A nice chap and very much on the ball when things needed organising, he had important connections. Once he was told to acquire wine in the Rhineland and was given 6 days to do it. Without informing anybody, he took 12 days before appearing with large quantities of wine and simply said that it couldn't be done any quicker. Whenever he went and did something wrong, he just called his uncle in the Reich Air Ministry in Berlin, General Christiansen, and everything was hunky-dory. He had an excellent relationship with Oberleutnant Reuter. This gentleman was a young huntsman, and Kay managed to organise many fine hunt for them both. I was astonished at the superb supplies and the vast quantities of schnapps they'd acquired. A few weeks later, however, I discovered that he and Reuter had definitely gone too far. As it was described to me, a rations supply bunker had already been set up in no man's land for a future advance. Kay managed to track it down, with the approval of Ruth, and they were living in the land of milk and honey on the contents. It was obvious that they had things that we could only dream about. We hadn't had any stuff like that for ages. But then the whole thing was discovered, and this time even Kay had to take at least some of the blame. Both men were transferred. The 25th of February. Slowly but surely, life is changing. Most of the winter clothing has been withdrawn. G.C. Freitzi Haas, wounded 2 weeks ago by a bullet in the leg, comes back to us. Sadly for him, he hadn't got a nice blighty one this time. A variety show at the train in Sicily. A Ukrainian troupe in attractive national costume puts on a really excellent performance. Wonderful folk dances to Russian music. It was well worth the hour-long march to get there. Things are still quiet, with only our Nolmax's gun firing to great effect at the Russian bunkers. In the evening, we visit the commander to discuss the general situation, and also to talk light-heartedly about job training. Fred Kroger suggests that we should build a house together, me as manager and him as cook. He reminded me about the conversation years later, and we had a good laugh over it. On the 10th of March, I order the platoon to fire at Will 6 heavy machine guns, 2 light machine guns, and a number of mortars. A superb piece of theatre as the tracer trajectories cut through the night sky. It really cheered the men up. 5 Russian Martin bombers fly overhead, but fortunately they drop their cargo well behind us. Since yesterday, there has been no firing at all from the islands opposite. Has Ivan evacuated the area, or is he just trying to make us think so? The footbridge to my command post, 50 metres long and 1 metre 50 wide, is finished, well camouflaged, and only waiting for its official opening. Now I've been promoted to Prince of the Sapso Lake, and anyone who passes by has to pay tribute. The days are becoming more beautiful, warmer, the nights are clearer, and we don't need to post as many sentries. On the 20th of March, the great battle begins. From 5:15 a.m., the Russian artillery has been firing in our left sector. Within a few minutes, at least 200 shells from 12 gun barrels have been counted, along with 7.62, 10.5 and 12-centimetre mortars. A sinister rolling barrage across the front. 9 Ratas fly over Tinolovka, and at the same time the Russian artillery is firing smoke grenades in the direction of Akti, certainly as a signal. My Idzikovsky Recce patrol arrives back and runs into Oberleutnant Leonhardt, who's taking his platoon to reinforce the Gustmann's Hill. But no enemy movement can be seen, at least not where we are. Close by on our left, though, we hear that 7 or 8 tanks have broken through, and 2 assaults by Russian infantry have been beaten of T. Along the entire enemy line we can hear loud voices, the barking of dogs, the noise of lorries and tanks. On the next day there's another heavy barrage, this time up to 18-centimetre caliber, 4 Stalin organs, Katyusha multi-barreled rocket projectors, with them. These have little effect, but their eerie whistling stretches the nerves to breaking point. The fire is getting too close, and I order the reserve group to get ready. Feldwebel Sulima with 14 men. The bombardment continues to increase, but at last our own artillery is returning fire. At 10:45 a.m. the news comes in that Maklakova has been retaken in a counterattack. Eventually things quieten down. The Russians haven't achieved the breakthrough. They were facing 4 regiment over there, commanded by the excellent Commander Walter, a man I know from Narvik. Nothing happens after all, so on the 25th of March the old rumours about a transfer return start circulating again. Where will we be sent? Damn it, at least let's get away from here. We're attack troops, not defenders. There was a lot of action last night. At 10 p.m, our own artillery began a bombardment of the Knobloch base, to such effect that windows here rattled and the sand trickled through the joists. For 2 solid hours they bombarded the positions in order to soften them up. At 4 a.m, the base was seized back from the Russians with very few casualties on our side. The rumours that we're about to be relieved have proved to be well-founded. At 4 p.m, officers from the relief unit come through the positions. The Murderers Division, we don't know why they're called that, is relieving us, excellent infantrymen. 2 of their Hauptmanns with the Gold Cross are discussing the situation with us. Then on the 28th of March it actually happens. At 2:30 a.m. the sentry suddenly shouts in delight, "The relief is here!" You had better believe how happy we are. Our base is taken over by a lieutenant with a heavy machine gun squad. It's Unteroffizier, a fine East Prussian, and an excellent marksman. There's no question of sleep now, so we chat until morning. Then it's time to guide the new men round our positions, hand over sketches and situation maps, count ammunition and hand it over, and finally make our departure. Cape Horn and Pig-Headed Bunker have been our home for 6 months, half a year full of happenings. The long nights of entrenchment, the work, the watching, they're all over now. I think of our many wounded and of our dead comrades Max Greubel, Zweig and Waldfried, men we must leave in this place. We march along the filthy, swampy roads for 25 kilometres, seeing columns of vehicles, detachments of men marching to the front, or, like ourselves, back from it. At 4 p.m. we reach Bonakovo, our objective for the day, and squeeze into houses which are already full to bursting, hoping at least to warm our chilled bodies at a warm stove. Next day I will go with Schmitz, Schroeder, Munth and Kissel as an advance party to Demidov and get some Russians to prepare a couple of houses for the men. Then I'm in another advance party to Rudnia, about 47 kilometres. Lucky that we don't have to go on foot. A flash of inspiration takes me to the station, and yes, in the afternoon an empty train is due to leave for Vitebsk. I keep on until they agree to wait, and the train takes the company with it. We race ahead to Vitebsk and discover that we're to go to our old area in Babinitsy. We stay a few days and get our equipment into some sort of order. We reckon that we're sure to be heading for France. Could it be that we'll be off to Argentina again? On the 3rd of April I get the whole company and its vehicles entrained, and we set ourselves up in the goods carriages. We, that is the 1 parachute machine gun battalion, and the members of the anti-tank unit with the self-propelled guns. At 7 p.m. we pass Minsk, then through endless marshlands, fallow land, vast forests. As we're about to hang up our hammocks to sleep, there's an explosion, the smell of gunpowder, splinters of wood and coal. The train stops. Light out, weapons at the ready. A mine has exploded under our carriage and torn it apart. Of the men of 1 platoon, Ebert has been badly wounded. Bader, Reichert, Schuster, Stolpke and Gumpolzberger less seriously wounded. We seal the place off and stand on guard, then fetch engineers from the locomotive. It's our good fortune that a hospital train is just arriving, which can take our wounded. The journey continues through Brest-Litovsk, Radom, Warsaw. Young kids are swarming about the station here, trading in every possible kind of goods. Their chocolate turns out to be biscuit with a coating. Their trashy letter paper is expensive as hell. Much laughter as the station police arrive, confiscate the goods and distribute them to the troops. We notice a great deal of construction and building work in Wortegau. Translator's note, the area of Western Poland annexed by Germany. Then into the Reich itself, where we recognize German thoroughness, cleanliness and order, the streets full of well-dressed people and the girls already in light clothes. Glogau, Halle. We still don't know where we're bound. It's now the 8th of April and real April weather. It's snowing. Among the new railway crew is a confirmed communist from Cassel, who has scat cards instead of a prayer book. He was sent to a concentration camp in 1933, fled to the Soviet Union in 1934 in order to find the justice he was seeking, but was banished in 1937. No one knew why. Some people were shot and others fled like himself. So he returned to the Reich, cured of his love for the workers' paradise. In simple language, he tells us his story. We won't forget it, not for a long time. Kassel, Koblenz, Trier, then delousing in Moumelon on the 10th of May. We find ourselves sitting in a large, well-heated room, from gunners through to the Hauptmann, all together for the first time in ages. To celebrate, we have a singing competition and a lot of laughs. Paris, along the Seine once again, Chartres and Alençon, where the anti-tank men disembark so they can travel on to Beauce. But we're staying here. Feldwebel Krasser arrives, and there's much to tell. At the Hôtel La France, I discover first-class private quarters, and we're greeted by Monsieur Demorel, who owns a local laundry business. A couple of wonderful days there, then I'm ordered to report to the commander. Fantastic news. I'm to return to Gardelegen as an officer in charge of the rear party detachment. 4 whole weeks in the Reich, 4 weeks with Gerda, my girl. I set off on Maundy Thursday and arrive home on Easter Saturday. Home. In this case, meaning our garrison town of Gardelegen. After our return from Russia, we were originally moved to Saint-Chamas in southern France, and then to Senas in the same region, where we remain. For weeks now there have been daily exercises to prepare against enemy operations by land and air. The whole world is waiting for the Anglo-American invasion of Europe. The only thing is, nobody knows where it will come. but there's a strong possibility that the first drama will be played out in the south. Over and over again, weapons containers are packed at top speed, and embarkation exercises perfected. Scarcely a night goes by without us being turfed from our beds to improve our combat readiness. We officers have 2 sleeping quarters. In normal conditions, we're housed very comfortably in French villas, but when we're put on standby by the division and told to maintain combat readiness, then we have to pitch camp in the old barracks. These constant alerts eventually have a dulling effect, since after a while nobody really thinks that they'll ever come to anything. So I'm not particularly impressed when my Batman races in at crack of dawn to wake me. In full combat gear, I wait until a company messenger thunders in to tell me to report immediately to Battalion HQ. Now that's not an everyday summons, so I pause long enough to throw a few things together, especially tobacco. It's bloody freezing at this hour of the morning, and I'm a bit uneasy about what lies ahead. I report to the commander, who immediately sends me as an officer courier to the division at Cavaillon with a number of questions. Something's definitely afoot. The other alerts weren't like this. We soon reach the town by motorcycle. With some amusement, I think back to the officers' cooking course that was set up here by order of General Heydrich. Utterly untalented in this area, I only managed to produce a few tomatoes, filled with a diced meat salad, and even that had been made by other people. Although I must say that the whole thing was rather cleverly garnished. After my attempts at bread making, all that was left in the mess tin was an undefinable dumpling of cement. Now the atmosphere is very different as we wait for the staff major. At 6:30 a.m. all the couriers have arrived, and we're ushered in to see Oberst Haring, one general staff officer of the division. We stand round the map table, pencil and map at the ready. Big disappointment. We're not told anything about the situation or the operation in prospect, only that all units must prepare for a parachute drop. At least that news cheers us up. There are rumours of an overland flight of 6,000 kilometres with an intermediate landing in Italy. That could mean Greece, Italy, or even Crete. Now that would be best of all, if the Anglos had landed there again, on the island we conquered 2 years ago. Then we deal with the battle groups and the departure airfields, and return to base. In camp, everything has been prepared for the departure. The motor transport columns have been moved up and camouflaged. The vehicles are lined up, well apart, on a broad highway guarded by tall poplars. Hauptmann Hirsch is to bring the train overland to Rome. A pity for him, he'd have enjoyed some action. Later I discovered something that I still find absolutely incredible. Gefährseiter Otto Pohr, horse handler for Major Schmidt, has been given the job of bringing his 3 mounts along. We appear to be fighting a feudal war. The field kitchens are steaming, and long lines of soldiers are queuing for their hot tea with rum. Afterwards, to comply with the new orders, uniforms are changed and the companies modified. It's quickly done, and then we wait for the order to pull out. At 3 p.m, the order eventually reaches us by radio to transfer immediately to Airfield Orange at Avignon. The columns form up and the battalion gets underway. Meanwhile, we've heard over the radio that the Allies have invaded Sicily. Now our prospects are clear. It looks like our company is going into action there with a combat strength of 2 officers and 90 NCOs and other ranks. The others are on leave, have been seconded elsewhere, or are on the notorious Heydrich courses. We reach the airfield by evening, but as there's no prospect of a flight that day, we pitch camp and eat. The airfield itself is chock-a-block with aircraft. Our old friend Auntie 52 and a whole armada of gliders, all ready for takeoff. They're well camouflaged, lying around the perimeter of the airfield or hidden in nearby copses. With luck, we'll be away in the morning. The mood among the men is fantastic at the prospect of more action at last, and maybe even a parachute drop. The 11th of July. We slept excellently under the aircraft until woken by the sunshine on our faces. The sky is a beautiful azure blue, the sunlight already dazzling. Not necessary to wash anyway. Where would we get water? The whole morning is spent in preparation, loading the weapons containers into the aircraft bomb racks. But it's clear that we're short of at least 10 aircraft, and the commander, quite rightly, is reluctant to let his battle group be broken up. It's got damned hot, with the sky itself shimmering in the glare of the sun, even under the shadow of the aircraft. This time we're not going to be transported in the old Junkers, but the stylish Heinkels. I write one more letter to my girl, telling her about these last moments. She'll already suspect where I am, because where else would I be likely to be with an operation like this going on? We eat lunch in a little canteen that's been erected, with a schnapps or two afterwards, to wash it down. Then it's 4 p.m. and, almost incredibly, the order for takeoff has finally arrived. On with life jackets, a last few photographs, then into the aircraft with many handshakes for those left behind. Strap on the belts, though I move forwards into the nose compartment. Take off at 5 p.m. The propellers turn faster and faster, the engines roar into life, and the surface wind churns up the dust, throws it high into the air. The first aircraft roll to the runway, take off and soar away. Then it's our turn. Still nobody knows exactly where we're heading, not even the pilots themselves. They have a sealed envelope which they've only allowed to open at a specific stage of the flight. But we know it now. After the landing of the Anglo-American forces on Sicily, one parachute division, stationed in southern France as Armed Forces High Command Reserve, was transferred there with the greatest possible speed. These units included our machine gun battalion under Major Werner Schmidt, who had earlier served with the Berlin Police, 2nd Group, Linden Inspectorate, and then with the Special Prussian Police Detachment within the Hermann Göring Regiment, which was trained as a paratroop unit. Most of our old men came from this unit. Our pilot is extremely young and has no combat experience. Before this, he was at school in the Reich. They've gathered aircraft from absolutely everywhere to bring the division to the target airfield. 2 years ago, things were different. In those days, the division had aircraft placed specifically at its disposal, and Transport Wing 30 was assigned to us. Now some of these aircraft are little more than old crates, including ours. Consequently, we're soon lagging behind the others when we finally manage to get airborne after a bad takeoff. Our pilot tries unsuccessfully to establish radio contact. We're approaching the coast, with Marseille lying below us. On our left is Toulon, where the French Navy is based. Ahead of us are some aircraft, they can only be our own, which are continuing on course. I lie in the nose compartment and get a fantastic view. The sea is below, an incredible deep blue, the dusk falling over it with the incomparable beauty of the south. Cumulus clouds turn orange-red, blood-red fire flowing from the setting sun. A destroyer flotilla is cutting through the water beneath us in the opposite direction to our own. The pale, speedy ships lift up out of the blue waves. Their crews wave at us as we pass overhead, and we wave back, welcoming the sight of a little piece of home. We feel close to our comrades below, doing their difficult duty in these waters. Slowly, the flock of wild birds forms up into a proper formation. At 7 p.m, Elba, where Napoleon went into exile, lies below, tiny against the massive expanse of ocean. About 5 of us are approaching from the left, certainly from another airfield. With our greater speed, they're soon lost from sight. At 7:50 p.m, we pass a powerful-looking formation, then pass over Cercio. The sea is still, a beautiful blue as we pass Cap Corse, but then the darkness falls quickly. Past Naples, a thin white column of smoke is all we can see Vesuvius. And then at 8:30 p.m. we land at the nearby airfield of Capodolio. On the perimeter are the planes which carried Dew, Geiswid, Idzikowski and Westenberger and their teams. But where are the others? Flight control tells us that the main formation has landed at another airfield about 20 kilometers east of Naples, in Pogliano. One of our planes is having trouble with its wheels, and replacement parts are damned hard to get hold of, as there are very few Heinkels down here now. We take a quick decision to join the others, but are forbidden to take off because of the darkness and our lack of knowledge of local airfields and conditions. So for now we have to stay here, which won't be too bad as long as we manage to link up with the others tomorrow. Over to flight control and the phone to see what's happening over there. After some delay, I get through to Feldwebel Krasser, who tells me that they've got no more information thither. He'll wait for my next call at midnight. At least we get the chance to eat a decent meal, getting our special rations, then try to get quarters at the Minerva Hotel. Success? They have clean rooms with every comfort, even to general astonishment. A bath. The The men and I feel like princes. Who knows how long it will be before we get to sleep in a bed with clean sheets again. The air raid siren at 12 a.m. doesn't disturb the men at all. They're completely out to the wide. There's some anti-aircraft fire, but it soon stops. For me personally, though, it's a dreadful night. Unpleasantly warm, and what's worse, having to be on the bloody telephone every hour trying to find out if anybody knows what we're meant to be doing in the morning. After all, I'm responsible for this mob, and I'm just as desperate as they are to get into action. But in the end, even I managed to grab some sleep. The 12th of July. We're up in the early hours and travelling through Naples, though we're less impressed with it than Goethe was in his travel memoirs See Naples and Die. I found out from Krasser that the parachute equipment is being left behind. From personal experience, I decide to leave the rucksacks here as well, so the men haven't any unnecessary burdens to carry. The fighting won't be easy, so why should the men have to carry their baggage into it? I leave Obergefreiter Locke behind with the stuff after he's volunteered for the job. Obkrieger Dick's aircraft isn't fit for takeoff because of damage to the tailwheel. 8:35 a.m. We reach Pogliano after barely more than 5 minutes, but have to search for our unit for some time among the mass of aircraft. Then I report to the commander, who's delighted to have his flock together again. But we can't proceed any further due to lack of fuel. An enormous number of planes are standing on the airfield and round the perimeter. I reckon at least 300. For the first time I can also see our biggest transport, the Giant, which has 6 engines and looks like a prehistoric monster. The whole thing provides an impressive display of the power of a mighty armed empire. It's afternoon and there's still no petrol for our planes, so the prospects for takeoff today are disappearing rapidly. With a lorry I've got hold of, I fetch Dew and his men and the rucksacks, which the chief has ordered me to bring after all. Then at last we're all together, roll into our blankets under the aircraft, and full of anticipation for the day ahead, finally sleep. The 13th of July. Today we should be away at last. As we thought, our destination in Sicily is Catania. The date isn't too auspicious for a superstitious soldier, and we're all a little bit superstitious, but we decide that on the contrary, it will be a good sign for us after all. Takeoff is to be at 6 a.m, so there's incredible haste and activity to get ready on time. The air rumbles with the noise of hundreds of engines, the dust blots out the sun. One machine after another rolls to the cement runway and rises into the sky. Then it's our turn. Up into the morning air, past Vesuvius and out over the open sea. Our tired old crate hasn't been able to keep up, and we're alone in the sky yet again. The pilot is getting apprehensive and would like to turn back, but I manage to keep him in harness because we'll maybe be able to link up with other aircraft during the flight. No luck so far, but we limp on. I post an observer at every window to keep a lookout for enemy fighters. The machine guns are made ready, and I clamber into the nose compartment again and pore over the map. At last we spot a small formation of Jayus, which we overtake, then fly along the western coast of Italy. There isn't much in the way of fortified defences to be seen, just some barbed wire entanglements here and there reaching down to the beaches. Past the Straits of Messina, and now there'll be an increasing danger of British fighters. Tension mounts, though many men still manage to fall asleep. The monotonous humming of the engines induces drowsiness, and the danger of fighter attacks doesn't worry experienced men, especially when there's nothing they can do about the situation anyway. We must be very near our objective because we can see 3 Hillels from our wing, recognizable by their squadron markings and numbers. All engines and maximum power so that we can get close behind them. Christ, the pilot takes a deep breath, relieved that he's no longer alone in the sky with his little bird. Then Catania lies beneath us, the airfield comes into view, and we glide into land. 8:14 a.m, and we're landing on an excellent cement runway at Catania Airfield. 2 of our planes are ablaze on the airfield. Has there been a raid just before we got here? If so, our tired old crate brought us luck after all. We haven't even stopped rolling when a lorry shoots out and orders us to be quick. British fighters attacked 2 of our planes during landing and set them on fire, though one of the fighters was shot down. At top speed we fetch out the heavy weapons containers, throw the rucksacks into the lorry, unload the bags of supplies. A last handshake for the courageous aircrew which got us here despite all the difficulties. Then off to the airfield at top speed, because there's a justifiable fear of fresh attacks. On the way, the driver, a private in the Nazi Party Motor Corps or NSKK, tells me about the recent attack. Not far from the airfield, I meet up with the chief, who orders me to move some 8 kilometers further south where the battalion is assembling. The road is relatively good, though extremely dusty. With our vehicles jam-packed with men and equipment, we can only move slowly. We pass a sentry on the road, then we soon see our commander Major Schmidt. Short instructions and directions to the bivouac area, and we're there. A couple of farmsteads are scattered around here. Olive groves cast their shadows, and from the little hills you can see far across the flat countryside. All in all, an idyllic place for a little rest. Allocate the sites quickly, then the men can get out of the vehicles and unload. We have to be as quick as possible, because they're expecting the fighters here as well. A little hut becomes a makeshift HQ. Under the broiling sun, the men are lugging the weapons containers under the trees and camouflaging them. I take a few minutes to give myself a wonderful cleansing wash under the nearby spring and to shave off my beard. More vehicles from 1 and 4 companies are arriving. In the sky we can see the first formation of 4-engined enemy aircraft heading towards the airfield. Hope to God that the blokes over there see them in time and get under cover. Then the shockwaves from the explosions reach us. Columns of smoke rise and spread out till they look like thick clouds, and our thoughts are with our comrades who recently landed at the airfield. Soon Hauptmann Latin arrives with the others. Now for an assessment of our first casualties by going through the complement of each aircraft. Obergefreit Glom killed, Busser with severe burns, Zartner, Vulper and Geisweiss seriously wounded. In addition, 2 aircraft are still missing. Appalling casualties before the bloody operation has even begun, and all because they sent the formation off without any fighter escort. What kind of people have we become? There are no new orders yet. Everyone's encamped under the olive trees, cleaning weapons and equipment, doing a fry-up or just basking in the sun. The whole farmstead is now excellently camouflaged, with no indication of any military presence. Night comes slowly into the valley, our first night in Sicily, and a beautiful one. The moon shines brightly in the olive trees and makes us dream, dreaming of love at home and the happy hours we spent there. Our first night, and how many more will we watch through? How many sacrifices and how much anxiety, how much blood will be spilled here? It's quite simple. All we want is a first-class operation with an attack, like in the old days and with all the trimmings. I take my boots off and pull on my shoes, determined that tonight at least I'm going to get a reasonably comfortable sleep. Our guns are lying at hand, uniform complete. Maybe this very night we'll be sent to the front line. Our commander is receiving his orders now, and, as usual, will be the last man to be able to think of sleep. The sentries have been posted on elevated ground. I dream and doze the time away. At 10 p.m. aircraft suddenly appear overhead, and our own sentries are shouting German paratroopers. We know that reinforcements should be landing or making a drop sometime. But shit. When the signal flares light up the eerie darkness, we can see yellow and red parachutes. In an instant, WC Al, realize what's going on. British airborne troops overhead, still wearing my shoes, no time for anything else, submachine gun in my hand. Everything happening in a matter of seconds. The first prisoners are already being brought in. Great volleys of fire. A fantastic performance from our men behind their guns. More and more aircraft are arriving, gliders coasting down to earth. Our fellows behind the machine guns are shooting like supermen. 4 big American transport planes, Douglas type, crash to the ground in flames, and 3 gliders are set on fire. Wounded men, mostly Tommies, are brought in. The fields are full of burning straw, lighting and battlefield, and cones of machine gun fire cut through the darkness with their trajectory. Here and there I can hear the deep voices of British NCOs. Krasser gets a shot through his left lower leg, has it bandaged, then starts fighting again. Other men come in with serious wounds but still want to get out there again. These are absolutely fantastic men. Prisoners are arriving constantly. In the absence of the commander, Hauptmann Laun has taken command of the battalion, and I'm in charge of 1st Company in his place. By morning, the situation is clear, and a defensive line has been established. I talk to lots of Tommies, mostly men of my own age. They're certainly not eager to fight, and their equipment looks fairly pathetic. The uniform resembles our motor vehicles' combinations, though the camouflaging of the steel helmet looks useful, and their footwear is generally old and worn out. The guns look pathetic, reminding us of Russian weapons. Simply knocked together, the muzzle sight consists of just an emergency sighting bar. Their parachute rations aren't what we remember from Crete either, and in no way comparable with our own. The only things we savour are the wonderful chocolate and, of course, the cigarettes. They're well in advance of us in one area, though, and that's the fact that they all have their own sanitary and medical equipment with them. Each man has 3 Lisi ampules of morphine, water disinfectant, a Tabrin, and even anti-mosquito ointment. A fantastic pack, and small and handy to boot. Physically, these are medium-sized, good-looking fellows, some of whom have already fought in Africa, while others are direct from Britain. In my opinion, their spirit is none too good. They tend to surrender as soon as they face the slightest resistance, in a way that none of our men would have done. They reckon that Mr. Churchill is a good man, but not a model or example to follow. And they're not as sure of victory as they were on Crete in 1941. Their whole weaponry, ammunition and machines comes mainly from America, and their rations from the states of that nation. All in all, I get the impression that these troops are somewhat different to the ones we faced in 1941. They have deteriorated in every respect. The 14th of July. By morning the situation is clear. In front of us and in the west there are only straggling enemy units holding out, whilst in the cast they have taken up position by the slopes and the coast road. At 5 a.m, 3 and 4 companies each send a recce patrol into the countryside ahead to discover whether the next 2,000 metres are clear of the enemy. Meanwhile, we provide cover with our heavy machine guns. Huge numbers of weapons, along with 12 prisoners, are brought in. Another recce patrol of mine under Feldwebel Jetta brings back 2 prisoners and a quantity of automatic weapons. At midday, 4 company captures a number of armoured scout cars and anti-tank guns, along with 7 prisoners. All the ammunition lying around nearby is blown up, and the material and gliders destroyed. A Douglas and its attached glider are shot down by Obergefreite Dorner. At 3 p.m, the enemy naval artillery sends some broadsides overhead, so we take refuge in a grotto and wait for it to end. Unfortunately, we suffer casualties this time. Oberjäger Fischbeck and lively little Bader are both killed, and Jukta receives a slight head wound. It's a bloody mess. Those dogs out there in their tubs can fire just like they're on manoeuvres, and we're just sitting targets. Meanwhile, 2 and 3 companies have taken control of the hill, but been driven back to their old positions by the ceaseless fire of the naval artillery. Casualties on both sides. At 6 p.m, 2 enemy armoured scout cars drive up close to Battalion HQ. The first shot misses by 10 metres. Then Oberleutnant Thiessen tries to engage them in close combat and is killed. After a short time, thank God, they turn away to the south. However, as things now stand, if the battalion stays in this area for any length of time, it will be completely trapped by British forces advancing from the south. Since our commander is currently discussing the situation with the general, at 7:30 p.m, Hauptmann Long gives the order to withdraw to Simeto Hill. That's the little river that we crossed on the journey here. It's already getting dark as the first units of the battalion begin to assemble near us in a little olive grove. Oberleutnant Rieker provides rear cover in a masterly fashion, whilst I concentrate on securing the flank. The most humiliating thing for our company is the fact that we've got no means of transport, and so, apart from our weapons and ammunition, can only take the bare essentials with us. Our rucksacks and all our spare clothing have to be left behind, so we pile them up and set them alight. I was right in Naples when I suggested that everything superfluous should be left behind, but there's nothing to be done now. I sit in the trench and watch the arrival of the various companies. Just pray things go well. All it needs is for some well-directed mortar fire into the middle of us, but fortunately it doesn't happen. The enemy has certainly been made extremely cautious by the destruction of his airborne forces, and is bound to pursue us very slowly and cautiously from now on. Some of the prisoners, around 100, are sent back first. Then the battalion sets off in a long column with 4 company at its head. To avoid being recognized by advancing enemy units, Hauptmann Lorne resorts to a trick. He makes us take off our helmets and gets the Tommies marching between us to keep theirs on. It seems to work. However, this struggle with our gear, the equipment and guns, the need to drag weapons containers on their tiny wheels, it may be using up the last reserves of our strength. As soon as there's a break, the men collapse into an exhausted sleep. But the journey still isn't over. We march past a shattered fighter airfield and then reach an anti-aircraft position where we're to make our defense. The food's still cooking. That's how quickly its former defenders have shoved off. But we've no desire to eat just now. Instead, we drop into the hay for 1.5 hours of wonderful sleep. The Tommies grant my request not to disturb us. They'll be too tired themselves. Slowly, it's grown quiet. Apart from the sentries, everyone is asleep. What's going to happen next? The fact that we've made a tactical retreat here isn't too serious, but the way these anti-aircraft positions have been abandoned doesn't speak much for the fighting spirit of the German troops who were here before. They've been allowed to get soft, living in the land of the citrus groves. The 15th of July. Awake again at 6 a.m., then select and occupy defensive positions. The numerous bomb craters offer adequate defense against artillery fire, so the most important thing at the moment is camouflage. A recce patrol under Feldwebel Rees brings 2 prisoners back. Some British airborne troops have also landed here, obviously put down in the wrong place. The day passes quietly, despite the moderate artillery fire. At 8 p.m., 5 enemy heavy cruisers and a large number of destroyers sail past quite unmolested, heading northwards and very near to the coast. It's an impressive display of force, bound to cheer the Tommies but depressing and humiliating for us. We work throughout the night to construct our defensive positions. More than anything else, we've got to provide some protection against the burning sun and to stop enemy aircraft spotting us. The 16th of July. Punctually at 1 a.m. artillery fire begins along our left sector. It's quickly followed by a British attack, which is beaten back. Where we are, there's only light harassing fire, otherwise things stay quiet. Then at 8 p.m. there's renewed artillery fire on our left and tank movements. So far we haven't received any precise situation reports. The 7th of July. Morning passes with light shooting, aimed more at the anti-aircraft battery to our rear, otherwise quiet. But physically I feel sick as a dog, aching limbs, headache, dry throat, the whole works. Stragglers, infantrymen, make their way in. They're from a fortress construction battalion from Lake Constance, and were forced to retreat here earlier today by enemy tanks. On our left, we now have a hole 2.5 kilometers wide and no reserve troops. These infantrymen, mostly older men, seem thoroughly weary and lacking in fighting spirit. Towards evening, the commander decides on a withdrawal. The next line is to be held about 500 meters north of here. We move out without being spotted. By now I'm so ill that I can't even walk by myself. Oberjäger Wolf helps me, but we can't keep up with the pace. Suddenly we're alone, don't know the way, and find ourselves just wandering about. Eventually we hear the sound of spades being used, so we must have managed to find the right place purely by chance. Then we come across Oberleutnant Rieker, who gives us more directions. After we find a little gatekeeper's house, I collapse, too weak to go any further. I send Wolf to the Hauptmann and fall asleep. The 18th of July. At 8 a.m. I suddenly hear noises outside. Pistol in hand, I creep outside like old Shatterhand himself. But it's only a mortar section moving into position here. I take my leave, finally approach a red house and report to the commander. The company has taken up position in an old anti-aircraft gun emplacement hastily abandoned by its crew. It's a miserable sight, everything lying around. Stores with clothing and equipment, a complete orderly room with secret division orders lying open and in full view, also tailor's equipment and a superb shoemaker's workshop. They were carrying on a real peacetime lifestyle here, but it was irresponsible to leave everything lying around when they retreated. At 10 a.m., the enemy artillery chucks a few shells in our direction. It's not surprising, since the men have begun to behave as if it's peacetime, fetching water from nearby streams, although the countryside here is fully visible to men in the hills opposite. Afterwards I make my way to the aid station, take my leave of the commander, and a few hours later I'm travelling in an Italian armoured car to the military hospital in Catania. This is a superb hospital, built high up on a hill, with large airy terraces. When I arrive, I suspect that the Sicilian campaign is already over as far as I'm concerned, but in fact the good food soon brings me back to health. There are a lot of wounded men being moved out at the moment, mainly Tommies being taken to Messina. At first I found myself sharing a room with 3 ordinary soldiers. Thank God it's got a mosquito net as well. The whole place is incredible, and if I wasn't so damned sick I'd be happy just to sit in one of the deck chairs on the sunny terrace. First and foremost, though, I must get out of these clothes. My whole body is covered with flea bites, with 1,000 tiny holes. I suppose we all look the same. There's an air raid warning at around midnight. They have to carry me out, otherwise I'd never have got up at all. However, the planes fly past and this calms things down, since Catania looks as if it has already had a bad time. The 19th of July. Nobody here is taking care of us. There's only a few weary medical orderlies sprawling around in the corridors. Eventually one of them arrives and brings coffee at least. Then, in response to my own energetic requests, they fetch us biscuits and cheese. In the Bay of Catania, 2 light cruisers are bombarding the southwest quarter of the town. At 11 a.m. I'm moved to a comfortable officer's room with an excellent feather bed, decent wardrobes and, most important of all, a bathroom next door. It would be nice to stay here a while, but I'm already so much better as a result of the proper diet that I'm hoping to be on my way again tomorrow. In the evening, I spend a few hours with the doctor in charge here, Major Klingelbofer and Dr. Ruth, whom I already know from the battalion. For the first time, I get to hear more news of the war, especially about the bitter fighting in the Karst. The 20th of July. I'm dressed and ready, waiting only for transport. Eventually I manage to catch a lift to the aid station, confident that I can make my way back from there. By the time I reach the battalion with a medical orderly, it's 10 p.m. Good to see that they're glad to have me back safe and well. Then it's time for explanations as the commander describes the company's latest triumphs. He says that this morning, after a bombardment of 4 hours, the company beat back an English attack without suffering any casualties itself. The enemy attack was supported by 10 tanks and supporting fire, but our men fought like the devil and knocked out 5 of them, whilst another 2 had already been destroyed by the 8-centimetre anti-aircraft fire. The piece de resistance came from Feldwebel Schach, who set 2 tanks on fire with an anti-tank mine. It was a bad day for the Tommies, who suffered a lot of casualties whilst we didn't have any. A few days later, this triumph was also reported in the communiqué of the High Command. However, it turned out that 1 man from the signal communication platoon was shot dead in the road ditch by one of the British tank commanders. Our conversation is suddenly interrupted by an abrupt resumption of artillery fire, again in the sector defended by my own company and 2 company. The strikes are too numerous to count, but there are at least 4 per second. How have the British managed to move in such a massive quantity of artillery?